Thanks, Ron, and thanks everybody for your time this afternoon. So, just from an agenda perspective, we're just going to do a couple of intros here, then we'll touch on kind of just Microsoft and media in general, talk about kind of how we approach the industry and some of the areas we're focusing on, talk a little bit about some momentum we're seeing across the industry in partnership with Microsoft. We'll touch on some of the partners that we're working closely with and then highlight some areas of innovation, and then if there's time, we'll open it up for a Q&A. So just from an intro perspective, Bruce, would you like to just intro yourself here to the group?
Yeah, thanks, John. I am Bruce Cosden, a cloud solution architect based in New York, working on enterprise commercial accounts focused in media and entertainment. And my core strength is the core infrastructure of the Azure platform.
Awesome. Thanks, Bruce. And I'm John de Havilland. I'm a customer success director here out of the same region, out of our Northeast region, based out of New York as well. Lead a team of cloud solution architects focusing on a large number of media and entertainment accounts here out of this region. My team focuses a lot on the data, AI, and advanced analytics stack in the Azure ecosystem, helping customers understand that. So when we talk about Microsoft and media, if we just step back and just look at Microsoft's overall philosophy, our mission at Microsoft is really to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more, which is pretty bold and open statement here, but we really try to do that, and we really try to embody making things easier for people like yourselves to use our technology in interesting ways to drive innovation and business value. It's really not just a set of words. We really, when we talk about empowering people, we really mean it with the right technology at the right time anywhere in the world to really drive what you're looking to do. And this is definitely a philosophy we take over to our approach to the media industry. When we look at kind of our approach working with our media customers and partners, from a Microsoft perspective, we lead with our partners and have a partner-first approach in this space. We know there's a large number of best-of-breed partners who have really great solutions running on our cloud platform. And so we really partner across the ecosystem, working with many customers and partners that you work with to build out a core platform that enables those partners to deliver the end-to-end solutions that you're often looking for. A lot of that is also, empowered by our cloud platform, our hyperscale infrastructure and reach that Azure brings to the table from a global perspective, covering many regions across the globe. I think we're almost up to 70 regions now with our own networking, connecting all of those regions together to allow you across media workloads to get better sense of improved latency and throughput and more reliable connectivity between the different regions in the world where you may be operating. And then the ability to then spin that up and spin that down on demand to get cost affordances that the cloud brings around that. From a media philosophy perspective, we want to take an innovation-driven approach first, partnering with you to help you understand how to use our platform and how to use it in interesting and innovative ways to change how you're doing business, to really help you bring in better revenue streams, to excite and delight your customers in interesting ways as well. And finally, we're action-oriented, and we've got a team of architects and technical folks and industry experts that we can bring to bear to partner with you to really help you see this come to life. And so we really want to kind of lean in and help you build things and really drive that bias for action for driving solutions. So when we just take a look at kind of some of the driving forces of transformation that we've been seeing and the industry is seeing across media and entertainment, there's this huge drive and growing need for original and digital content. Just back in 2019, there was a significant amount of money just spent on original content in the US alone. And we're continuing to see that grow more and more. And then following on from that is the idea of having to reimagine revenue streams. Digital revenue was making up it's potentially going to make up 56% of the media and entertainment industry's income by 2022. That number is growing rapidly, and this was data pre-COVID, I believe. And so with COVID and the pandemic, a lot of that has accelerated. We're seeing consumers switching off of cable and leveraging OTT platforms and being able to subscribe at will to different streaming services. And we're seeing a need for media companies to reimagine how they're generating revenue around that. And that leads into kind of responding to content consumption needs. Consumers are changing how they consume content and changing their expectations of how that should be delivered. And so often consumers that maybe were previously subscribing to cable are now transitioning off of that. We have an increase in cord cutters, etc., and then increasing in subscriptions to over-the-top platform service, over-the-top streaming services, as well as being able to choose what they watch when they watch it and switch on a fairly regular basis, which often hasn't been the case. So this whole desire to address what consumers are looking to consume in different ways is changing and transforming how the industry shows up. And then finally, kind of applying this digital intensity across the overall media value chain. Video on demand is growing rapidly, and we're seeing this year over year. It's becoming a huge market, and it's going to be massive, and it's going to continue to grow, especially as consumer demands change and the revenue streams increase. So we're seeing a lot of change. There's a bunch of driving forces, a huge amount of winds of change around this, and we're here to help partner with companies like yourselves to drive some of that change and help you understand how to use our cloud platform to enable some of this. When we talk through kind of key objectives that we see customers looking at across the media and entertainment perspective, one that comes top of mind, and it is more relevant this year than maybe in prior years, but enabling workforces to easily collaborate around the world and also in a remote and distributed capacity. Pre the pandemic that's obviously going on right now, but pre that we saw a lot of interest in this, and it was an area where we were partnering with various media customers around developing and exploring and using the cloud to enable this. But with the need for a lot more people working from home, where we look at production sets now being a lot more remote, where you can't have as many people on site, this has rapidly expanded and accelerated at a fast pace. From a cloud perspective, using Azure as that platform to enable this is a very easy step to make, and Azure, because of our global reach, empowers companies to start using it to allow their teams across the globe to collaborate, and also affording them the ability to use things like our global network and our ability to scale up and down on demand to get advantages from a cost savings perspective, but also efficiency perspective that maybe weren't there previously. And that kind of leads into the ability to be able to kind of do this scaling on demand as we see the cloud bringing a lot of flexibility and elasticity into these models, being able to spin up computing and storage hardware that previously you'd had to invest in upfront to meet some of the demanding needs, both from content creation perspective, but also editing and live distribution perspective as well. So spin up and spin things down as you need them for productions that you're creating, whether it's TV shows or promos or movies or other aspects that you may be creating on the fly. The cloud and in the Azure ecosystem, you have so much flexibility in terms of the computing power you can bring to bear and the elasticity to scale that up and down as you see fit. And then finally, there's a lot of importance around security and reliability of storage, as well as the data that you're collecting. Large number of consumers that we're working with, collecting a large amount of data, especially as consumer trends are changing and consumers are interacting with various different streaming and digital platforms. Being able to collect data and then use that to improve the consumer experience also comes with responsibility of managing that data in ways that consumers feel that their privacy is protected. We're seeing that through regulation landing both in Europe and in the US and around the world. And within the Azure ecosystem, we take that very seriously, and we work very closely with our customers to ensure that they're able to provide that level of privacy and guarantees their consumers that the data is stored in a secure way, as well as assets that you're creating. If you're creating movies or TV shows or other aspects of entertainment that you want to protect, being able to trust the cloud that it's stored in a secure way is super important. And so from a Microsoft perspective, we really kind of put that front and center. From an industry perspective, the way we look at media and entertainment, there's kind of 5 pillars that we like to focus on. I'll just touch through some of these briefly here, but one is around kind of the whole concept of accelerating content production, being able to kind of streamline those production workflows, being able to kind of leverage a cloud to spin up powerful machines when you need them to do the editing and content creation that you're trying to do through our partners running on the Azure platform, such as Avid, Adobe, etc. But then also being able to collaborate in a way where you've got distributed workforces bringing the power of the Azure ecosystem to bring disparate groups together across the globe, to bring your best people to work together across different projects. And not only when you look at from a Microsoft perspective, you've got the Azure ecosystem bringing the computing and the networking and the storage power to the table, but expanding that when we look at our Office ecosystem, bringing the power of Teams as a way to do collaboration across the globe and integrating aspects of your production workflows into that, make it super easy for collaboration to happen in real time and in a continuous fashion without being disrupted by the need for people to be in the same location. And then when we kind of look at these other pillars, optimizing content delivery with a shifting consumer trends to streaming platforms and the digital world, the need to be able to optimize how you're delivering content both to those consumers, but also how you're delivering it to the various different platforms you need to support. Super important, being able to do that faster and more efficiently, and then looking at the Azure ecosystem to help you understand how you're doing that today, and then starting to optimize that. And we're seeing a lot of interesting concepts such as AI ops, taking in your data, using AI to optimize processes, etc. And then some of that then feeds into this 4th pillar around understanding your audience, being able to take some of the data, take some of the information that you have, and being able to really build out a view of how your audience are interacting with the platforms you're working with, the content you're creating, and then really helping deliver and delight them, deliver great experiences and delight them in interesting ways that'll help you ensure that they're continuing to use your platforms and finding value in it. And then finally, being able to kind of monetize those experiences as well, taking that data and really bringing it together to produce interesting experiences, and then also drive innovation and maybe figure out what is your next content you're going to create. When we look at just momentum we've seen from Microsoft perspective, there's a couple of ones I want to just highlight here. In the summer, we announced our partnership with Universal Filmed Entertainment Group, and this partnership is really about bringing together the creative community at Universal as well as Microsoft to build out a whole platform for production workflows to enable frictionless remote collaboration and content creation. So really extolling some of the virtues that are highlighted across the trends that we're seeing and the pillars that are out there. And so we're partnering with DreamWorks around building out a cutting-edge production platform, both live action and animation. And there's some interesting aspects of that all running in the Azure ecosystem, but also bringing concepts like common data model around that to make that easier for the different groups within Universal to work together and make it more efficient for different productions. Similarly, we're doing some work we're doing a lot of work and have a partnership with Walt Disney to develop a whole concept of scene to screen around content workflows, piloting new ways to go about creating, producing, and distributing content using Azure as a backbone to do that. And then the final experience I wanted to touch on, and partnership that was recently announced in this year, was a partnership with the NBA. Partnering with NBA Digital, creating a new innovative direct-to-consumer platform on the Microsoft Azure ecosystem, bringing a lot of data into our platform around how the NBA fans are engaging with these platforms and the assets that the NBA are creating. We're using ML and AI to really deliver that next-generation concept of personalized game broadcasts, as well as using that to help improve how fans are engaging with the NBA and the teams that are part of it. So with that being said, a lot of this couldn't be achieved without our bigger partner ecosystem. And if you recall, I mentioned that from a media philosophy perspective, partners are top of mind. So I'm going to turn it to Bruce to touch a little bit about our partner ecosystem here.
Yeah, thanks, John. That was great stuff. So I think, this is a great segue from what John was just talking about, which is the what. What have we achieved from a momentum perspective, to a little bit about how. So from a partnering for success, how did we achieve some of that? So if you click to the next slide, John.
Yep.
Sorry, we're going to have to do a little bit of relay here. So within the media industry, there are many great solutions out there that run on Azure either exclusively or in conjunction with other clouds. But we align very closely with these partners on optimizing their solution to run in Azure. The way we look at it is that we're providing the core infrastructure platform, the global footprint, and the global scale networking services to enable these media workflows. But our partners bring in the specific and specialized services that work together seamlessly with our platform to provide those end-to-end media capabilities. Some of the key areas where we achieve some of this best of both world approach is in content creation. For example, what we've done with Avid and Adobe. Content management, for example, some of the stuff we've done with Avid in building a Nexus environment on top of Azure. Cumulo and NetApp are other good examples. And our content monetization platforms and audience intelligence. Now, there's a lot of partners that we work with, and we bring them all into the ecosystem. The point is that we're not in competition with our partners. We're not trying to build a media studio. We're trying to offer to our customers a media platform utilizing the best of industry skills on our best of skill, which is our platform. So one of those reasons that we are so powerful in this way is because our ecosystem fits entirely together. We build all of our services in such a way that they all integrate and work in a ultimate service mesh, and then our partner solutions fit on top of those and provide a standardized set of controls and APIs and service layers that optimize the experience. So from a customer perspective, the end state controls, it seems like a first party service on Azure. And in some cases, they are first party services, such as our relationship with Azure NetApp Files, where it's integrated into the platform from an engineering level and providing the best of what NetApp has from highly scalable, high quick access, low latency, and petabytes of access within the Azure ecosystem utilizing our first-party services. So there's a lot here. I'm not going to hit them all up. They're all great partners that we work with. If you guys have questions about some of the partners that work with Azure, we'd be happy to answer that offline. Next slide, please. So, just to dig in for a couple of examples in terms of how we've partnered with some of our great premier partners here. One is Avid. Avid helped solve a distinct problem in the industry, which is a remote editing workflow. And this has become super critical, especially with the COVID situation this year. I'm sure we can all relate to that. Certainly for me, the first half of this year, I spent pretty much the entire time this year urgently responding to studios to help get their workloads into the cloud so that production could continue while the offices were closed. While filming shut down pretty hard, a lot of these studios had a lot of content that they still wanted to get up and running and out to people that were now sitting at home full time or working from home. So, they needed a solution to be able to do remote editing with all their workers not able to come to the office. And maybe perhaps that has changed kind of the view permanently, in that there's a new understanding that work can now be accomplished remotely and collaboratively with a lot more productivity in mind than what people thought in the past. So now cloud is becoming a key enabler. We have a lot of customers coming to us now and saying, hey, maybe cloud is the right platform to enable these use cases that we typically were, stuck on in our on-premise environment. So again, we have a distinct partnership with Avid, where they're primary provider of the remote editorial workflows on our platform. We have optimized their solution with our engineering teams to run in a highly optimized way. And we've tested workloads spanning regions across multiple continents where editors can work collaboratively on 4K video content. Next slide. Here's another great example of a partner that we work closely with to build accelerators to help get customers onto Azure. So, problem that we run into a lot when we work with a customer is, hey, do you have any assets or pre-written scripts or Terraform or Azure Arm automation to help us, deploy a standard set of services? You have to have done this with, other customers. And the answer is absolutely we have. And here are some accelerators that we work with our partners to help build out to make sure that you can take advantage of some of these services right away and get a jump start into your journey in Azure. So I'll just touch on a couple here. Archive is one example. This is a very common workflow where assets need to be stored in a low-cost location, either for redundancy, disaster recovery, or as a source sync endpoint for production processing. Think about a production on set in the field. They have assets coming out of camera raw. They need to make it up to a cloud environment, and then they need to be archived for safekeeping. So checking those assets into and out of archive, having some place to be able to do that quickly, and the ability to do a lifecycle management on those archive assets so that you can determine what tier to put them in from a cost perspective. So you can keep them in a hot tier or an online tier to have direct access to them, move them down to a cool tier if you want to have a lower level of access control, and then archive or deep archive if you're not going to access it as frequently, and you can definitely lower your costs that way. Production is another key consideration. This is where we have a set of Terraform scripts which enable a customer to deploy an end-to-end visual effects environment or an editorial environment. So in this case, we support partners built out Adobe's Edit Suite, and that full suite can be stood up on a set of virtual machines in Azure utilizing a Teradici front end that enables visual effects editors to quickly get up to speed in building those capabilities. Finally, we have collaboration capabilities which utilize Azure file shares and file sync, which globally replicate content to offices, branch locations, and on-set locations so that those files are available to users where they need them, to production officers, to archive, art departments, etc. Whoever needs those, they can access them in their locations with full replication between those sites. And you can access it via a user interface, an SMB local share, and they even built out a Teams interface where you can type in the content that you're looking for, and it can pull that up on demand and search those shares for you. Next slide. So just wrapping this together for this section, you know, in terms of the previous slide of some of those accelerators, we built a site so that we can kind of centralize the best of assets that not only our partners, but Microsoft internally, our cloud solution architects working with customers, and even our customers can contribute to, called the Azure Media and Entertainment Git repository. And the link is on this page here, but we can send this offline as well to easy link to it. And it's divided into sections that, you know, relate to the categories of media service that you might need to accelerate. So, you know, starting up front in the upper left is core enablement. Unless you have an Azure environment ready to go, you know, you're not going to be able to deploy any solutions behind it. So the first thing that comes up very typically is, how do I enable that core? What does my landing zone look like? What are the core services that enable video editorial to work in Azure or any of these other media products? So that core enablement has a repository for deploying a full end-to-end landing zone. And then we have these other areas, and I'm not going to go through every single one for time here, but you know, we have things in the media supply chain, the video editing category, which is where we have our Avid and Adobe Premiere workflows, the ability to do content ingest, so getting those workflows into Azure, which is really important, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes, performing that content production and distribution. So if you're looking for an asset in one of these areas, this will be a core place to look at. We will keep it up to date on a regular basis, and we're looking for our partners to contribute to it as well. So if there's anybody out there that has some interesting acceleration solutions for Azure, we'd love to hear from you. All right, next slide. So now we're going to shift into the innovation. So, you know, now that you've seen some of the accelerators and the partners that we utilize, what solutions did we actually create that are innovative in this field? So next slide is, you know, we have a couple to show you here. One is live mixing in Azure. So if you haven't considered a virtualized control room, this is something that can be done in Azure. It's something that we've been building proof of concepts for, working with customers on actively. The idea is that, you know, with Teams, for example, and there's other streaming services that you can bring to bear, but with Teams you can do NDI. It's native and built into the product. So Teams as a broadcast endpoint can serve a feed up to software that's a virtualized control room, like Nutek's virtual mixer device. And within Azure, it can consume those feeds, whether they're either NDI from Teams or NDI from other feeds that you might have in your departments that are outputting or emitting signals, or actually direct signals like SRT from different devices. And the mixer can then compose that output stream and distribute it anywhere. So if you think back to what John said about our global network and our 69 plus regions globally, or 70 regions, that composed output stream can ride along our backbone and serve, you know, different regions and different areas of the country from single, you know, a single virtualized control room in Azure. John has a great blog post about this that we can share as well, to if you want to build one yourself and try it. Next slide. So content editing, we've talked about this one a number of times with what we've done for Adobe, so I won't beat this one to death, but you know, this is kind of a solution view of what that looks like. And what you can see here is, you know, you have users in remote sites with content, or, you know, they just want to connect from these remote sites. They can be in a corporate office, it can be from another site location or branch location, or it can be a remote user working from home over the direct internet, utilizing the PCI-OP protocol. We have a great relationship with Teradici that enables this very low latency access to Avid within Azure to be able to do these editing of you know, 1080p and 4K content. And now we can even do 8K content in the cloud based on the way we've optimized some of these scenarios, and utilizing some of our network capacity, we can achieve up to 8K editing in the cloud. Next slide. So that's a great segue into this slide, which talks a little bit about our Azure Edge Zones. And this is kind of a cutting edge service that's gaining a lot of traction and momentum in the industry. While Azure has, multiple regions all over the world, there are a lot of rural areas that, need to be connected to enable these workflows to happen. So, back to the onset, you're in Romania in a jungle, in the forest, filming on location, and you need to get assets up to Azure. Well, there's several solutions here that can help enable that. For example, if you're within a 5G neighborhood where there's a connection with one of our major partners, that we have deployments of Azure Edge Zones within those towers that can enable that connectivity directly to Azure. So your communication point is with that 5G tower, and you'll get, that ultra-wide bandwidth connectivity to get those large files up to that tower, but then it's up to the tower to get it up to Azure. In those cases, we've laid, very specific fiber and direct connections from those towers to meet-me points to Azure's edge and Azure's backbone to enable that communication. But if you want to take it a step further, let's say you're in a disconnected environment. Maybe you're filming on a ship, you're filming in a location that doesn't have direct connectivity to a tower. In that case, you can use an Azure Private Edge Zone, in which case you're using an Azure cluster locally in that environment. It's like you're leveraging Azure without it actually connecting up to one of our Azure regions, and have that disconnected experience while leveraging Azure services. Next slide. So content ingest, and this is the last one I'll cover, but this is one of the core solutions that are really relevant to Azure. We've in order to have the editorial workflow, in order to have NDI process feeds, in order to have a lot of the services that we talked about and to enable cloud, you first have to get the content in. So content ingestion is one of the key principles of getting that data into Azure. And certainly, we work with Aspera and Signiant for acceleration into Azure, but we also leverage those Azure Edge Zones that I spoke about previously to accelerate that content or have that continual content push to an Azure endpoint. From there, we have a content ingestion pipeline that enables some of the more advanced capabilities of getting that data QC'd and properly formatted and prepared for intermediate files and the media supply chain and the downstream processing systems. So in order to do that, we want to normalize that content that comes in. So when we get this stuff into a storage endpoint, we have configurable controls and capabilities to be able to isolate these by the vendors and consumers that utilize this pipeline. And from there, we can then determine what type of operations need to happen to those files in terms of extracting metadata information, feeding our common data model so that this data is then available about the assets that are moving through the pipeline, and acquiring or extracting intelligence about the data that we're processing, such as keyframes, names, locations, people, etc. We can pull that out through this pipeline, and then we can do the final transcode to the intermediary formats, as well as extract the audio channels and create kind of the output files that the intermediary teams expect, when they're working in their MAM environments. So this is one of our core processes as well to enable those media workflows to happen downstream. That's connected with all of our additional ecosystem of data sets, such as Dynamics, Office for documents that are shared across sets, and Power BI for looking at the data and looking at it, getting an understanding of the assets that are coming through this pipeline. The final thought I'd mention on this is this content ingest pipeline utilizes our low-code, no-code framework so that business users can manage this pipeline. It's not necessarily for IT people. The business people, the people that do production in the field, the people that do production within the studios can manage this pipeline. Next slide. And I think we hand it over to
thanks. Yeah, thanks, Bruce. And so just continuing the theme of innovation here from a Microsoft and an Azure perspective, just taking a look at from a data and AI perspective. Nice segue there from Bruce's last piece, where collecting data into that graph and then being able to leverage it. When we think about data in AI, a lot of the customers we work with have data in various different groups, whether it's customer data, whether it's operational data, whether it's product data, or even data about their people. Getting signals from all of those, we're seeing a lot of thought and interest and advantage in building that into a centralized sort of connected data fabric, bringing different pieces of data into the Azure ecosystem, building out a connected data fabric across all of these different data sources to really drive efficiencies, drive innovation, and bring business value and get better insights into products and creation aspects that you may be driving. And so when we look at this being the core connected data fabric and then leveraging that data to then drive operational efficiencies, be super interesting, and there's a lot of customers we're working with around that. But then also bringing different sets of data together to drive newer channels of innovation that maybe hadn't been seen before, because these data sets often lived in silos. And so helping break down some of those walls, getting these signals together, but also using the right data storage layers for the right pieces, but allowing them to communicate together is super important, because there's a lot of different ways to store data, and in Azure we recognize that, but then in wanting to bring those together and not have them siloed is super important too. And so within the Azure ecosystem, leveraging all of this as a connected data fabric with various layers across it to allow communication between those data sets drives a lot of this innovation. And we touched on some concepts earlier around taking some of that data and then using the concept of artificial intelligence and AI ops to generate efficiencies across your process, using some low-level uses of AI to introduce efficiencies where maybe there's manual intervention today, is driving a lot of value to enable your people and your consumers to engage in different ways. And then similarly, when we're collecting this data and building out this connected data fabric, it allows you to bring various different groups within your organization to work together to start democratizing AI across your ecosystem and bringing that power to drive some of that innovation. But none of this can happen without the strong trust and governance systems around that to ensure the data and the lineage of that is tracked in the right way. And then finally, we're doing a lot of innovation around industry-focused data models, being able to kind of look at various sub-industries and common data models that maybe apply, and allowing those to be introduced and driving value quicker, so that you're not having to reinvent the wheel each time, and integrating that into some of our systems too, so that when you're working with partners and vendors within the ecosystems that you're in, you're not having to create custom models around some of that. And so this is just a view of what that connected data fabric could look like, with Azure being the kind of the core of it, choosing the right data store for the right type of data, but landing it in a connected data fabric, bringing layers such as cataloging, management, governance, and then putting across that maybe common industry data models to give you consolidated views that both yourself within your organization talk to, but then with your vendors and your partners all talking the same language, and then building API layers and workflow orchestration, whether it's with our Power Apps or Power Automate suites, or even with other aspects in the Azure ecosystem, and then bringing other apps and services on top of that to drive innovation. And you can land all types of data within this, and we're seeing customers starting to do this a lot. And then even more interesting and exciting is taking that concept and pushing it out to the edge. As Bruce touched on, we have a really strong offering across various different ways to interact on the edge. We're seeing a lot more interest in landing both data at the edge, but also AI at the edge, taking your AI trained models, training them in the cloud with your large data sets, and moving some of that out to the edge to drive real-time efficiencies that are afforded by being closer to your consumers. But then when you look at this in its whole ecosystem, you've got the Azure being at the center of all of this, but then you can bring the power of teams to play, the power of Power BI or Dynamics to bring this all together from a collaborative perspective. The final area I just want to touch on is our artificial intelligence layer for video indexer. So within Microsoft, we want to empower everybody to do and achieve more, and a lot of that's driven through the research we've done from an AI perspective, and enabling that and making that available for customers like yourselves to start using this today without requiring an army of folks who have PhDs in statistics and machine learning. And so we've taken a lot of research and we've built out a bunch of easy to use, pre-trained machine learning models across various different types of content, whether it's images, vision, audio. And a bunch of that has been wrapped into a concept called Video Indexer, which takes a lot of these trained models and runs them across videos to provide super interesting insights across the video content that you're creating, to allow you to drive a lot of innovation and get business value out of the content that you have, whether it's indexing the thousands of archive clips you may have to make it easier to search, whether it's creating captioning around that to allow you to reach a larger audience across the globe, or whether it's to be able to highlight brands within that or do content moderation. Allowing AI to take a lot of the heavy lifting out of that frees you up from having to do this in a manual way that's often error prone and not as cost effective. So our video indexer platform is super easy to use. It's simply you send an API, the video assets you want it to analyze. It'll run the analysis for you using pre-trained models that Microsoft and Microsoft Research have worked on, and engineering have worked on and trained across thousands and thousands of videos and spent many compute cycles training. And we'll then return back to you intelligence about your videos. So simply all you have to do is give us the videos and we'll give you the intelligence back. And then you can take that deep, rich intelligence and embed it into your workflows, embed it into your downstream systems or upstream systems, and build new platforms out and build new ways of engaging with your consumers out around the intelligence you're getting back from this. I'd like to just show you a demo of this in action. So let me just jump out of the PowerPoint here. So everyone can go ahead and do this after the video here, or after the presentation here. But if you go to videoindexer.ai, you can log in, and then there's a trial portal in there. You can start playing around with it. This is simply a demo front end on top of Video Indexer. So Video Indexer at its core is a bunch of machine learning models and an API, and you can send videos to that API, but there's many ways you can send data via an API. This is a front end to demo that, but typically you'd want to kind of plug the API into your systems or build your own sort of front end into maybe existing content management systems. But essentially within here, you can upload your videos, and once you've uploaded a video, so there's a bunch of videos in here, and I'm just going to pull up one. This is a Microsoft Inspire keynote that Satya was giving, so I'm just going to load that up here, and I'll show you some of the intelligence that the system automatically generates about these sort of videos. So the video is in the system here, and I'm just going to pause it. So once it's analyzed the video, you get a lot of really interesting information that the AI is able to generate about what's in the video and what's being said in the video. So if we look at this, it's already gone through and identified all the different people within the video. Some of these people are fairly well known, so like Satya, for example, fairly well-known entity. Similarly, if there's other celebrities out there who are in videos that are typically well-known in the public domain, the system knows those and will automatically tag them, and you can see where Satya appears in the video, so it highlights all the areas Satya appears. There's also folks in these videos, because this is more of a Microsoft one, there's a bunch of people in the video who maybe aren't as well-known, but you can certainly come in and tag those people. There's ability to kind of give this person a name, and then anywhere else, either in this video or other videos in your library that this person appears, it'll be flagged as the name you've given it. You can also get information about what sort of topics are in the video. So it does topic extraction out of the video as well. It does label extraction, being able to kind of identify, well, where does a person appear in the video? Where does someone wearing glasses appear? Where are glasses appearing in the video? A good example use case, we did some work with a customer around using this to identify where certain pieces were appearing in advertisements to classify those advertisements. So an example could be, does alcohol appear in an advertisement, and being able to flag it as something that maybe wouldn't be shown during a kids TV show, for example. Similarly, there's entity extraction as well as brand extraction out of the videos too, and you can identify those. There's emotional extraction, whether someone's happiness, sadness, joy, etc. Within the video. Since this is really a keynote, there's some joy elements, but pretty neutral overall. And then it does scene extraction, so it uses intelligence to extract out and map out what it thinks are the right scenes within the video. And then there's also some work around shot detection, so whether it's an indoor shot or wide center face, for example. And we did some work with a customer who used this technology around shot detection to identify across a series of like 5 seasons of a TV show, to identify everywhere a certain close-up of a specific actor appeared, to generate a promo reel to advertise the next upcoming season of that. Then, this gives a bunch of insights here, but then also, if I switch over to Timeline, you get an AI-generated caption. So this generates the entire transcript using AI to convert the audio from the video into a transcript. And so you can kind of go through this. It also does intelligence within this to highlight anywhere there may be text on the screen, so that appears as part of this too. So if a bar comes up that says, talks about anything, or there's any text on the screen, they'll attempt to use optical character recognition to convert that into the transcript as well. And then even cooler from this, we've got this whole transcript, and you can go then take that and convert it into, so I could download this as a say VTT or SRT file to use for captioning. But then if I wanted to create this same file and wanted to do it in Croatian, for example, I can just simply choose a different language and automatically translate that for me, giving me a AI-driven transcript in a different language. And so this opens up a world of possibilities, especially if you want to widen your reach and provide captioning for videos in different languages. It's going to give you some of that right out of the box here as well. And so, there's the ability to kind of do a few other things in here. You can kind of train custom brands within the video. So depending on what you're trying to do, it can train those. There's a few other pieces you can do. And a lot of this is all driven through an API. So while the portal here is showing you a bunch of kind of top line things, there's a bunch of other information that isn't highlighted here in terms of things like content moderation, as well as being able to identify different types of sounds or where black frames are, etc., within the video. And then there's a bunch of other things that the API itself provides, and it's pretty robust. You get a huge amount of JSON back. See if I can pull down the JSON here at all. So here's kind of highlighting a few things. If I pull up, let me see if I can show that here. I may not be able to pull it up. So there's a way to kind of pull all that up. So I'm not going to be able to show that here. I guess here's the JSON here. So let me just pull up the JSON, see if it'll show me just show how big it is. So as you can see, this is all of the insights it's back, and it's horribly formatted here. I don't have my JSON formatter here, but as you can see, there's a massive file that comes back that gives you very, very detailed intelligence about the video. That's more than what you're seeing in that UI, and confidence scores come back with that, etc. So with that, kind of wraps up what Bruce and I wanted to cover today. So I'm just going to